Good morning, ladies, and welcome to Looking Up. This is a podcast for Christian women. I'm Kathy Pollard, one of your hosts, and with me is Carla Moore, your other host. And we hope to encourage ladies with this podcast based on Colossians 3, verses 1 and 2, which says, if you've been raised with Christ, set your mind on things above. Keep seeking those things which are above. So that's our goal and objective with these conversations. We just like talking about things that Christian friends might enjoy talking about and sharing what's on our hearts, and hopefully just helping everybody kick their week off on a great start and to keep looking up, knowing that God's in control no matter what. So, Carla, how are you doing today? It looks like you're back at the church building with another fancy chalkboard behind you.
I am. It's the same chalkboard. I just moved it a little bit down the row. So it's same spot, just a couple of inches further down.
Nice.
But I'm doing great. You always do such a good job on that intro.
Really? Thank you.
Yes, you do.
I don't feel like it.
No,
that's the hardest part, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Kicking it off, but you do well. Yeah, I'm doing well. Everything's great. I've got a little bit of a scratchy throat. We had gone down to watch the Katie kids this weekend while Aaron and Jordan had something going on, and both of the girls had a little cold or something. So I just got a little bit of that. I took some Zicam, getting over it. John too, but so
at
if I clear my throat, sorry.
At least you're not traveling to a big event to speak this weekend, right?
Yeah. No problems there.
By the time this goes live, though, it'll all be over.
Yeah.
It feels like we've been anticipating this for months and preparing for it. And then it's going to start tomorrow and be done before we know it. So, but I'm looking forward to seeing you, and I'm praying for your safe travels tomorrow.
We're excited about being there. It's so obvious that all of the Lehman members have just jumped in and helped get things ready. And it's so encouraging.
It's been fun. I think this is just one of those things that pulls everybody together. And it's so exciting to work side by side with people and learn even more about them. And we've just been so blessed to see everybody rolling up their sleeves and getting to work. So we're excited.
Well, one of the things that I've noticed about you and Neil is that y'all are so good to delegate is maybe not quite the right word, but to encourage everyone to be involved. And you were that way at Bear Valley. And it's really not everyone can do that, or not everyone does that well. You know, sometimes you have a way you want something done and you feel like you have to do it yourself to do it that way. But I was just telling John a day or two ago that you and Neil are really good about getting everyone involved and getting everyone excited. And that's a talent. So I'm appreciative of that.
That's very sweet.
Hey, you mentioned something about a food truck on your Facebook this week, some kind of a cupcake or some kind of tell me more about that. That sounds very good.
Yes, we're having food trucks out in the parking lot for the event. And Russell Simpson, one of our elders, met a young lady at CYC who is an entrepreneur, and she started her own food truck business. And it's some sort of bakery truck. I believe she does cookies. I think they're cookies.
Oh, okay.
She may do cupcakes and things like that too, but I think the flavors that she shared with us that she'll have available on Saturday, I think those are cookie flavors.
Okay.
So she's going to come bring her sweet truck up there and make those available during Equipped.
That's such a great idea.
Yeah.
How many different food trucks are there?
I'm not really sure. A handful. I don't know.
I think that's going to be such a helpful thing for people to not have to leave if they don't want to leave. Just get
we have a lot of restaurants close by, but it'll just be kind of fun, to just step outside the door and find something if you want to. We're gonna have a little tent set up where people can sit out there and eat. And
fun. Well, I can't wait. There's lots of things I'm looking forward to about this weekend, but especially getting to be with you. So what have you been up to the last few days? Have you done anything outside?
No. Well, yeah, we did. We went and got a whole truckload full of horse manure. That's been aging since last August to top off our raised beds to feed them and nourish them a little bit. We've been piddling around in the raised beds a little bit, but
it's been aging.
That's because you don't want to put it on there hot and fresh. That's not good for what you're trying to grow. But so it's been aging or sitting out in the sun since last August, and it's ready to go. But the big thing is I got my hair done. Can you tell?
You did. It's very pretty.
Thank you. I went back lighter again.
Okay.
So normally I do this back and forth thing. I think I'm going to tone it down and and go darker. And then everybody starts telling me how tired I look.
Thanks.
So, that's my hair
Thanks.
color. It's my hair color. So I went and got it yesterday. I went to have it done. I was like, I'm just ready to go back blonde, just bring it back. And the young lady that did it is only 23 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm looking at her going, she's younger than my children.
Mm-hmm.
But she did such a great job. And I was thinking back to when we were in Colorado, I was so spoiled because Cheryl Turner used to do my hair in her
Really?
home. Yes. She would, I didn't even have to say anything. She could tell my roots were growing out and she'd say, is it time for beauty shop?
Uh-huh.
And
that's a good friend right there.
Oh, such a good friend. And she'd say, come on over whatever day. And she'd have the coffee ready and she'd put that cap on my head and pull my hair through all those teeny tiny little holes in the cap and highlight my hair for me. And so it was amazing. I got to visit with her, have my hair done in the comfort of her home. The only downside to that is Bob and Cheryl Turner are probably the most hospitable people you'll ever meet. And so, and their house was right across from the church building. And so people were coming in and out all the time. I mean, sometimes it was just Bob, he'd walk in. Sometimes it was students that would walk over there and there
not
I
the
am,
most flattering pose with
the cap and hair sticking out everywhere or goop all over, looking like the creature from the Black Lagoon or something. And it's like, oh, hey, how's it going?
But do you only have to do highlights? Is that what you do, or you don't do your whole head? Your roots or highlights?
When I'm this light, I just do highlights.
Okay.
When I'm dark, I have to color everything and then do like subtle highlights, a few highlights also. So
it's funny that you did yours yesterday. I did mine myself last night. I used Angela Smith and I used to do that together. She would come and do my roots for me. But that was back when I didn't have quite so many roots. And now I'm probably, full confession here, probably 90% gray.
Really?
And yeah, I really am. And it was getting pretty bad. So I didn't want to come to equipped looking like a skunk. But I'm trying to lighten it a little bit, which is really hard to do with dark hair, but I'm trying to not. So T. Woolley has kind of helped me with this. She does my hair when I'm in Denver, but when we're here, I color it myself with that. I know we've talked about that Madison Reed, which I think is better than a lot of the other color stuff, but I'm just trying to use a lighter brown color, which this is, I mean, if you look at my eyebrows or don't look at my eyebrows, they're my dad's eyebrows growing on my face, but
I like it.
Well, it's a lighter. Yeah. It's more my natural color, I guess. But I keep thinking about that time down the road when I'm going to have to let it go. And I don't know how I'm going to do it. Either shave my head and let it all grow in. Probably not a good idea.
Do you really have to let it go?
Well, if I want to, I mean, I'm having to do my hair like every 3 to 4 weeks. And that is not fun.
No, it's not fun.
Because it's such a big difference, between this color and gray. So if I don't, it's just very, very obvious in my part. And when the wind blows, I'm self-conscious about it. Yeah. And so at some point, yes, I probably will, because I think gray and silver, white hair is beautiful. I love Cheryl Turner. Speaking of Cheryl.
Oh, yes.
If I could go from this to that, like in a day and not make people go, what in the world happened to you? I would do it. Maybe not quite yet, but.
Yeah. I just don't think mine's going to be that pretty color of silvery white or whatever.
You have gray?
I have some. I think mine will be that like steel wool. Like an SOS pad,
I guess we don't ever have to find out, do we?
Here, nope.
I know it's vanity to a certain extent, but I just not ready for it.
No, we don't have to be. I did my own hair about 8 weeks ago, and I was experimenting. I'm still trying to figure out what direction I wanted to go. And so yesterday, when the girl's doing my hair, she's like, what all have you been doing?
Was it rainbow hair?
She's lifting my hair and she's like, you've got a little red here. Did you under process something or what's going on here? And I went, well, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, for the record, I like your hair. I like your hair blonde and darker. I think it looks good either way. And I've never thought you looked tired, but
thank you.
However you're comfortable, go for it.
That's what Neil says.
Yeah.
Whatever makes you happy.
Yeah. He always says that, doesn't he?
Is perfect hair without ever having to do anything to it.
Yeah. That was probably That was about 25 years ago for
What? I
me.
was going to say, what year was that?
Yeah, because mine started going gray really early. My mom has beautiful hair. And I mean, I'm trying to remember who I was sitting behind a few days ago. It must have been at worship. And I was just thinking, admiring their beautiful silver hair. And it was somebody that wasn't old. Excuse me for saying the word old, but it's just the transition between here and there. And I'm not ready
Yeah.
for it. So someday, maybe.
Hmm.
Anyway, so we had a birthday party for Livy this weekend. Well, we didn't. Courtney and Micah did.
Mhm.
And she's going to be 1 on the 29th. So it was a little bit
Oh.
early, but it was a lot of fun. And they had a house full. I bet there was 50 people at different
Whoa.
parts of the party. And they had a little bouncy house outside and had pictures all over hanging from the windows and all over the table of her growing up. And so that was fun. Courtney had bought her a little, they call it a smash cake, where they can just dig into it. You know what those are? It's just a little cake that all it's for is for the baby. You just put it in front of the baby or the child and on their high chair, and then they just smash into it. Okay. And it's so funny to watch when they look at it and they look at you like, am I supposed to eat this? And then sometimes they'll just put a finger and then they'll lick their finger, and then before long it's all over their face. And hers was vanilla, and she was, like Courtney said, she was very polite about it, but I don't think she cared for it too much. She'd smile at them and then she'd touch it and then lick her finger. But then they gave her some chocolate cake, and she was all about the chocolate cake. She's a chocolate girl. She's a smart girl.
Yes, she is.
Yeah.
When I hear about those big fancy parties like that, I feel like I was such a dud mom.
Things have changed.
We didn't ever have a bouncy house and the big things that everybody, ours was, it's your birthday. You get to pick what we're having for breakfast, lunch, and supper, and what kind of birthday cake you want.
Yeah.
Then they had presents, and we did a big birthday for Gary's 16th, I think, where we invited all of his friends and pals over, and I made a cake in the shape of a guitar. And so then when it was Dale's turn, when he turned 16, he said, I don't want that.
What did he want?
Just a quiet family birthday. And then Carl did the same thing. When he turned 16, I don't want a big birthday. So we did that too. We were very low key for our birthdays.
Well, we had family all around. So we always had granny and granddad, mama and papa, and cousins and aunts and uncles that were here. And sometimes, occasionally, we would do a friend party, but it would be 5 or 6, not anything huge. And I've thought about that before. It's fun to do things big, the gender reveals and engagement parties and things like that. But it is very different from the way we used to do things back in the day. And, I don't want us to sound like cranky old ladies, but
back in my day.
Yeah. But it was a simpler thing to do. And
we were happy just to get an apple on our birthday.
And some hard candy. And a corncob doll.
All right. Now we're talking about our grandparents.
Or ourselves. Did you have parties? Did your mom and dad have parties for you? Birthday parties?
I had a 13th birthday party and an 18th birthday party.
Yeah.
The rest of them were family.
I know that mom had parties for me and neighborhood kids and, small little kid parties. And I very specifically remember, I don't know which one it was, but I remember having a yellow shirt with you remember those t-shirts that had the sticky kind of prints on them, the vinyl print,
Yeah.
And I guess I had just got my braces because it was a big smiley face with braces and it said 10 grins are in. I can remember things like that. I can remember really valuable things, but it was fun.
Cute.
Yeah.
That's cute.
And we also this weekend, just talking about things we did this weekend, we had a CPR training here at the church building, which I didn't really want to go to, but I know it was something that we needed to go to. And
I've never done that.
Really? Did you not even have it when you were a kid, like doing babysitting infant CPR?
No.
Because I did that years, and I was probably 13, and CPR has changed a lot since then, but it was Denny Williamson and Sarah Pogue, they were two here at the building that did CPR on John, and they were here for this training.
Mhm.
And there was just part of me that just didn't want to be here because of that. I just didn't want to
I
see
see.
that. And
Okay.
and it just,
Hmm.
I think I was a little more fearful than I obviously should have been, because
No, that makes complete sense to me.
it just brought back memories. And they also on the AED. Do y'all have one at your church building?
Yes.
Probably a lot of places do now that didn't used to. An
Mhm.
automated external defibrillator is what that is.
Mhm.
And it talks to you when you place the pads in the proper place. It tells you don't touch the person, and it's analyzing for a heartbeat, and there are only certain heartbeats. And I may have misheard this, but the trainer said if there is no heartbeat, it won't shock you, which I thought, why wouldn't it? Because it's trying to bring back a heartbeat. But she said there's two kinds of heartbeats, and one is like a too fast and one is too slow. John's was too fast. His was VFib, ventricular fibrillation, where it's just basically vibrating, not beating. It's not a normal rhythm. And so it's trying to shock your heart back into a normal rhythm. And so and I remembered, I did not remember before hearing it that day on Sunday, how it was talking, and it would say good compression. So it's telling you, and it will tell you if you're not getting a good compression, if you're not pushing down hard enough. And but the sound of the voice on that was, I hate to use the word triggering because I think it's such a trendy word. Not trendy, but that's tacky of me, but
it's appropriate. Everybody understands what you're trying to say.
Yeah. So it just kind of took me back. And but you need some of that. There's a lot of things that I think that we don't want to face or to go back and remember, but we need to be, just to have them in little doses. And it was a perfectly safe environment, and it was so in a way it was healing, I think. And I don't feel like I have leftover trauma necessarily, but I would encourage anyone to do that, because I learned some things about CPR training. She also did choking hazards. And so we learned about children, babies, if they're choking, how to handle that. And interestingly, Denny, who is John's cousin distantly, and I can't remember how the connection is, like their grandmothers were cousins or something like that. Okay. But he and John have been friends since John's a little boy. Denny's older, so I think he used to pick on John when he was a kid, but they've always been very close. And so I know that it was very traumatic for Denny to give John CPR, but at the same time, he cared, he cared about John and was very serious about doing it right. And he did. And I really do attribute Denny, and Sarah's the one that started it and Denny took over from her. But I really do feel like I call Denny my Superman, because he did it right, and it broke some bones, but and I think that you have to in order to get a good compression. But Denny has also saved someone from choking. Wow. He just happened to be out fishing one day or on his way to the boat and went past, and I'm probably getting the story sort of wrong, but he went past a little cabin where women were crying and screaming, and there was someone in there choking, and he went in there and he just picked up the guy and saved his life. So, it's kind of like I tease him a little bit when I can about it's sort of like Angela Lansbury in what was the name of that series that
Murder, She Wrote.
At some point, you start suspecting Angela Lansbury because she's always around when someone's being murdered. Right. But I told Denny, now we just need to put a 9.5-month pregnant woman nearby and let him see if he can deliver a baby. just take care of all those emergency situations.
My mind went back to Mighty Mouse. I think, wasn't it the one that was like, here I come to save the day?
Yeah. Well, we are going way back.
Yeah, speaking of old.
So that was my weekend.
I got to go to a police academy graduation, the Bowling Green Law Enforcement Academy, and my first cousin's daughter. So I guess that makes her my first cousin once removed. Is that how that works?
I can't remember how that works.
Anyway, she and her husband moved to Bowling Green, and he went through the academy and graduated and last Thursday. And it was really neat because there's tons of, ceremony about it. And they started out parading them down the street in the downtown square with bagpipes playing.
Oh, fun.
And yeah. And then there was the, do you call it color guard when it's
not sure,
the ones with the flags, and, they have to walk in step, and then somebody sang
some kind of parade.
Yeah. Somebody sang the national anthem inside, and the graduates got to pick who they wanted to pin their badge on them.
Mm-hmm.
And so Austin picked his wife, Caitlin, my first cousin once removed, and she had to walk up there on stage in front of everybody and pin that. And excuse me, every time they did that, you're just so nervous. Like, is she going to be able to get it in there in a timely fashion? Is it going to be awkward and clumsy? But she pinned it, and then they would present, for the first time, we present to you Officer Austin Griffin, Well, then they lined up all the graduates, and they all had to recite this oath at the same time. That was this long paragraph that they had to memorize, but the oath must have been written 150, 200 years ago, because it was using words like forthwith. And they had to, promise under oath that they have never participated in a duel with a deadly weapon, nor called someone out in a duel, nor even acted as a second in a duel involving a deadly weapon. And so they're having to promise all of these things. And it's like, when was this written? But it was really fun. It was interesting. And then as the guys were all leaving and walking out from the graduation, they had a quartet singing. My Old Kentucky Home was the name of the song. And it was like barbershop style quartet. They sounded so good, really tight harmony. So it was fun. I didn't realize it was going to be such a big deal. But
it seems like more and more, it's such a dangerous job to go into, and
yes,
unappreciated and
disrespected sometimes.
So I am so thankful that there are still people who want to go into law enforcement. We'd have chaos without them. So, and that already in some ways is. So very thankful for that.
I am too. And
barbershop. I love barbershop music.
I do too. I thought, is this a real group? They were officers, I believe. So they might just get together and sing for fun, because I couldn't find them anywhere, online or anything like that. But they sounded so good.
My nephew Reagan sings in a barbershop group, not a quartet, but a group. So I know they're still out there. I would love to go hear one, but you just don't see them much anymore.
My grandpa's first cousin was in the Music Man.
Yeah.
And he was in that quartet that sang in that movie.
Lyda Rose and others.
Yeah.
It's just fun music. My dad used to sing in one too years ago.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing I did was I made some sourdough cranberry pecan bread that actually turned out really well. And I milled the einkorn berries into fresh wheat and did it 100%. So normally that kind of bread turns out a little bit dense, but this turned out really, really good. And I almost hesitate to share that because I didn't follow a recipe. So I'm not going to actually be able to tell anybody. I'm not going to actually be able to share a recipe. So
you just made bread, but put pecans and cranberries in it, so do you have a recipe for the bread itself?
Well, I kind of follow roughly this easy bread recipe. It's really just flour, water, salt, and yeast that you bake in a Dutch oven. But I used a sourdough starter. And so I made sure it was active. I kind of mixed it up a whole day ahead of time to let it rise all day, and then shaped it and then put it in the fridge overnight and then scored it and baked it the next morning. So, I mean, I guess I could try and come up with something, but I don't have anything measured. So
I guess you could try that again on like Sunday.
Yeah, because I'll have tons of time for that.
Yeah, you will. I'll make some time for you.
All right. Should we get into our topic?
Let's do it
today. I know you have a lot going on afterwards. We're done recording. So we're talking about being a boy mom, because between the two of us, we have 6 boys. We each had 3 sons.
And we've lived to tell the tale.
We lived to tell the tale. We survived.
Survive and thrive.
Yes. And so far, I have one grandson and another grandson on the way. So,
Mhm.
but you have granddaughters. You have
Yeah.
girls now.
Yeah, we have one grandson. The oldest is a grandson, and then the other four are girls.
Mhm.
So those have been fun. Having little girls, granddaughters has been fun. But yeah, boy, mom, it's
Mhm.
challenging.
Mhm.
And when we were, talking about this and preparing for it, I just kept getting teary-eyed, and I'm telling myself, don't be sad, don't be sentimental. Let's just remember the fun stuff and the good stuff, and not that, it's good to remember the hard things too, because that's reality. But I was trying to remember all of the emergency room. Did you have a bunch of those emergency room visits?
Not a bunch, but we had a few for sure.
Yeah, we didn't have tons. And I think you hear a lot of and read a lot about when you have boys, you're going to spend a lot of time in the ER. But we had terrible insurance, and there were times that we had no insurance. So we had to be more, just think it out. Are we going to do this? Take him to the ER? Are we going to just try to wait it out? And so I look back on that. There's a lot of things about that I probably would have, if we'd had better insurance or better ability to pay for things, we would have taken them more. But I was thinking, Jordan had a broken nose in a basketball game. And I remember following the ball, I was following the ball, and he had the ball. And I don't remember exactly how it happened, but at some point, someone took the ball and went the other way. So I'm watching the ball going this way. And then I look back, and Jordan is bent over, and there's blood everywhere. And so he broke his nose in a basketball game, and ended up, that was real close to Christmas time. We had to have that set. And then he had to wear a mask.
That makes my nose hurt just thinking about it.
Yeah. And I have pictures that, it shows his nose like way off to the side. And anyway,
oh, poor guy.
He laughed about it, but he had to wear a mask for a while he played basketball. And I remember a couple of games after that, it was like a full face thing, trying to hold his nose in place. He ripped that thing off and threw it to the sidelines. He was just like, I am not playing basketball with that thing on. But so he had a broken nose, he had a broken collarbone, he had a broken finger, he had a torn ACL. He had staph infections and allergies. That staph infection, without getting too icky, I remember that was an ER visit, because he had gone to a retreat, and it was a couple hours away. And when he left, he already had this, I could tell it was an infection. And so I drew in Sharpie a line around it. Or he may have done it when he got there, but then, a couple hours later, it had gone beyond. Yeah. And so we knew that's something you don't mess with. And so we took him to the ER. And I remember, I won't go into the whole icky thing about it, but I just remember him when the doctor took care of it. I'll just say it that way. Jordan's face, he was both repulsed and fascinated by the whole experience. So that, and I did promise my boys that I would not embarrass or humiliate them. So I'm trying to be careful with my words. So those are the things Jordan had. Jacob had a broken foot from jumping off a cliff into some water. He had broken finger, he had a concussion. He also had a torn ACL. He had a stinger one time, which I didn't even know what that was, but it was out on the football field. Well, it's like someone's helmet hit him in the hip, right where his hip bone, the where there's not much cushion, and your leg just goes numb. So it was terrifying, because it was like, is he paralyzed? And so we took him to the ER for that. And then he walked out just as fine as he could be once it wears off. So stinger is a fun thing. So Micah didn't do quite as many sports. He was more into raising animals for FFA and things like that. But he did have a nasty broken ankle not too long ago. Well, 4 or 5 years ago. So plenty of those things that you think about with the boys, having to repair them from the daring things that they do.
Yeah, we had one of ours fell off the top. Sorry, I have a frog. Sorry.
It's okay. Don't worry.
Sorry. Maybe I should pause it for a second. You talk.
Okay. I'm going to talk while Kathy gets rid of the frog in her throat. Now she's back.
Yeah, I'm back. Did you hear that?
No. Well, good. I did, but maybe nobody else will.
Oh, maybe I didn't do it right. Well, one of our kids fell off the very top of the bleachers in a gym
Ooh.
one time, and it knocked his breath out of him to where he was like stunned, and we thought he was unconscious and all that kind of stuff. The only broken bone we ever had was Carl, and the other boys had already left home by that point, and he broke a finger, and we weren't sure it was broken, and we kept putting it off, and it was probably 4 to 6 weeks before we finally
Oh,
decided,
wow.
I wonder if there's something wrong with his finger, because
Thanks.
it's not. Yeah, and we took him to the doctor, and he had a fracture, so he won the award for getting the one and only broken bone. And not too long after he left home, my little doggy Ollie, something happened to him, and I took him to the vet. And I remember Carl just giving me the hardest time, because he was like, I had a broken finger for how long before you did anything about it, and then you're going to take your dog to the vet?
Well, come on. Yeah.
So, but,
Does he is it misshapen today? Is the finger?
I don't think so, but Carl saved all his Daredevil stuff for after.
Yeah.
They got motorcycles after they left home, and scary things have happened with that it's just terrifying. But
well, that surprises me, because your boys to me are always doing like the motorcycle things. I'm surprised that you didn't have more.
Wrecks on longboards and bikes and all kinds of stuff happened. One time Dale, I think it was, got a nasty infection in his kneecap from the gym. Ended up being MRSA.
Ooh,
and it was gross, and they had to do gross things to it that I won't talk about.
Yeah.
But so random, weird. One time Gary went to Cambodia, and he kissed a boa constrictor that had been in lake water, and he ended up bringing home a parasite.
Oh.
And so he was on the brat diet for weeks, and he lost so much weight. And so weird random things with boys. One of Carl's ER trips, he had taken a pre-workout that did something crazy with his heart, and the doctor said the difference between boys and girls: less drama, harder to keep alive.
Yeah, well, I always do say when people give me a hard time about not being able to keep plants alive, I say, well, I kept 3 boys alive.
That's right. Right.
That was my main goal in life.
That's huge.
Yeah, it is. They are still alive and thriving, thankfully.
Yes.
But it's fun. I think being a boy mom is fun. There's a lot of fun things about it. And I wanted a little girl every time I was pregnant. All 3 times I was wishing for a girl. Sorry, boys, if you're listening to this, if you do. I did. I wanted a little girl just because, every woman, I guess, wants a daughter. But I didn't find out with Jordan and Jacob what they were until they were born. But we did find out with Micah before he was born. And I will confess that I was wishing that he was a girl, but I would never, ever, ever go back and change anything. I am absolutely thrilled that God gave me boys. And I feel like I am much more of a boy type mom than, and I know that girls can be drama free too, but I just think boys are they fit what I needed. God knew that I needed boys.
Same here. And I didn't even know anything about him, because I only had a sister growing up. So then I had a boy, and that was really exciting. And then I had a second boy, and I was like, what? And then with the third one, I really expected it to be a girl, and I wore pink shirts and chewed pink bubble gum, and and found out we were having a boy, and I cried. But that was it. Then I was excited again. And
does Carl already know that?
Oh,
because I feel like he's going to be merciless about that.
I don't think he listens to the podcast, but
Emily, don't tell him.
Don't tell him. And then so many times I would call Neil when they were little about something that they were doing, and I thought, is this normal? I would call Neil, is this a boy thing? Is this normal? Should I be worried? Is this
yeah,
that seems strange to me.
Yeah. Well, I think, with boys, I guess I think of outdoors and digging in the dirt and worms and snakes and bikes and roughhousing and wrestling. And, I obviously we can overgeneralize to a point, but I really do feel like that's more of it's just ingrained into boys, and that's how they are. And that's okay with me, because they had a lot of fun together. Jordan and Jacob are 2 years and 3 months apart. And then there's another 6 years before Micah was born. So there's a pretty big gap between the older 2 and Micah. So Jordan and Jacob, they had their young childhood together. And then they were very, at the time when Micah was born, they were both very protective of him. But I was just trying to remember some things, some funny things about when they were little, and when Jordan and Jacob were probably 5 and 3, 6 and 4. That was when we were making the trip back and forth from Dripping Springs to the Southwest congregation in Austin. And this was before you had to have car seats until they're like 17 now. And they had boosters, but not car seats. And so we had a little red Toyota pickup truck with a half bench seat in the back. And they would get into it, and they would be bickering and wrestling and punching each other, and just, things that boys do. And I remember we would always, every trip back and forth to Southwest, they would end up, one had to put their nose on that window and the other one had to put his nose on that window, just to keep them apart from each other. So they would quit, and they would say, we're just playing, we're just having fun. And I'd always think, yeah, but someone's going to end up crying in a minute, or mad, or whatever. So that's a big memory from childhood of just boy stuff. I remember Micah. Sorry, Micah. I told him I wouldn't embarrass them, but he was a little kid. At camp one year, I packed all of his socks in the front pocket of a suitcase, not in the suitcase, but like there's the outside zipper pocket. And I packed all of his socks in there. And he was pretty little when he went to camp, because we were there too. And they let you go if you're younger than you're supposed to be if your parents are there. So I'm thinking he was maybe 7, maybe 6. Came home with every pair of socks still clean in that front pocket of his suitcase. So he wore the same pair of socks all week long. But things like that I laugh about and remember. And I'm sure you have stuff like that too, that takes you back.
Well, and almost the exact same stories. I'm sitting there listening to you, and I was like, well, that was my story. And
sorry. Socks in the suitcase?
Yes. Well, not ours was at camp. They would go to FPTC, Future Preachers Training Camp, and it started on Sunday. On Wednesday, Dale called me and said, oh, can you bring my toothbrush?
That's worse. I'm sorry, Dale. That's worse.
Yeah. And the backseat thing, they would start bickering and stuff like that. And we had 3 little boys in the backseat. And one time, one of them got really upset, and I was like, now what? And he was like, Carl's looking out my window. This is ridiculous. This is my car. These are all my windows.
Yeah. Just it's funny.
Silly things like that. We had an occasion one time where we had people over for dinner, and the adults were playing cards in the kitchen, and our boys were upstairs playing in their room, or so I thought. And then I heard a ruckus going on. And then a few minutes later, one of them came downstairs and tattletaled on somebody else. And I couldn't understand what they were saying. I just knew it had something to do with the toilet. And so, of course, he's saying this in front of everybody. I said, excuse me a second, y'all. I go upstairs, and they'd been playing with, those vacuum cleaner attachments, like you can pull off or attach to clean the curtains. And somehow, for some reason, there was an attachment wedged into the toilet.
Oh, my.
And I said, who did this? And all 3 of them denied it. And it ended up being this long thing where I'm pulling out all the stops. I'm saying, God sees everything, and he knows which one of you did this. And they all denied
pulling out all the stops.
And then I said, that it hurts my mother's heart for all 3 of you to deny this. One of you is lying, and it's hurting my heart that you're not fessing up. All 3 of them still said, wasn't me. They're all lined up, shaking their head no. And, and I just kept going. I kept trying to come up with everything, and none of them. And then I said, if one of you doesn't confess, all 3 of you are going to get in trouble. They still didn't say anything. And it wasn't until I looked at that attachment in the toilet, and I looked at them and I said, this thing can be dusted for fingerprints. And then all of a sudden, Carl went, he always put one hand over one eye when he started crying, And so, but to this day, he now claims it was not him and that his brothers made him fess up and, all this stuff. So that's just one of many, many, many stories.
Yeah, I'm sure there's so many things. And I struggle with remembering, I look back on that period of life for me, and in a lot of ways, I was just trying to keep my head above water.
Yeah.
Just trying to keep them alive, trying to keep them from killing each other. And they weren't even, they weren't, we didn't allow them to just beat up on each other. That was, one of them will probably tell me, well, we did when you weren't looking. And I'm sure that there was some of that going on, but it was just a period of time that if we're going to talk about regrets, and I'm sure that we will in some ways, of not being as intentional as I wish I would have been. And they've all grown up and they are wonderful men, respectable, and they all are productive members of society. They all have children, and there's nothing about any of them that I would change as far as their what they have grown into being. But would I go back and do some things differently? And I would. And I think that I would pay more attention to them individually, I guess. And I know that I did because John always talks about how I helped him to see that they each had their own individual personalities and needs, and they each needed different ways to be disciplined. They each needed different ways to have a conversation. And one of them, and I won't say who, but one of them you could just look at him and he would be disciplined. He would crumble. One of them was stubborn, and it took more of a firm hand, but yet he had a tender heart. So once you got past that initial stubbornness, he was not hard to discipline. And then the other one, it will be no secret, no surprise, but the other one, the older two boys say that Micah didn't ever get disciplined, because he's the baby of the family. I beg to differ, but I think by the time the third one rolls around, you kind of know what you're doing a little bit more, or you've figured out which battles to fight and not to fight every single one,
Or the third one has learned from his older brothers.
Yeah. Yeah, that is true. There's no doubt. I think my older two, because we went through the school system here in Dripping Springs, and the teachers, by the time Micah came around, they knew that he was Jordan and Jacob's little brother. And so I think there were certain expectations that Micah, which were good because Jordan and Jacob were good kids. And so they expected Micah to be the same. And I think you rise to the level of your expectations that people have of you. And so he did. But anyway, I just think back to that time. And John used to take them fishing, and fishing is not my thing. But it is very much, especially Jordan, still loves to fish. And Jake, he enjoyed it. But to me at the time, it was father-son time. And it was a time that I could kind of take a breath and have a little peace and alone time, which I needed. I think every mother needs that. But there's times that I look back on that and I wish that I had gone, because I see now how important it was to them. And I wasn't there to see those things. So I wish I would have done that. And maybe that goes along with the lines of just setting things aside that I think are important to do things that they think are important,
Yeah. And I think you were talking about the different personalities of your sons. It's always amazed me, raised in the same household by the same parents, and can have 3 different personalities. And thinking back on things I go back and change. Sorry, I always bring a frog to the podcast.
It's okay.
I think about 2 things that stand out overall. I mean, obviously there's a lot of things. We could have a whole podcast about that. Yeah. But probably the most significant ones would be, number 1, less screen time. And I don't mean for them, I mean for me. And I mean, not that it'd be a bad thing for them to have less screen time, but specifically for me, that's what I would go back and change, because, I started blogging way back when. I was always working on a lesson. Social media came on the scene. I was always communicating with somebody. And even though, we homeschooled, so I spent a lot of time with them, especially as they got older, even in the high school ages, we were all in the same room while they were doing their school, but I was always on my laptop, always. And I feel like that's probably their picture of me, is she was working on her laptop. And I just think that there are so many things that I could have done much later, and just spent more face-to-face time with them, interaction with them. And that really, I just shudder to think, how many hours did I spend looking at a screen?
Yeah.
During that time. And so that's one thing. And then the other thing is, how I don't know if this is true for you or not, but how some parents learn things after the fact that they never knew about.
Yeah.
And that we continue to do that. And I just thought, I knew of all the things, that we learned about them, we handled them, we disciplined how we needed to, and we moved on. And then, now they just think it's hilarious to share these things and some of it is kind of funny. And I'm thinking, what? I'm surprised you survived. I'm surprised you're alive to tell the tale, because they just did all these crazy things. And then some of it, it's like, how did that happen right under my nose? And I didn't know anything about it. So I think that's the other thing. I thought I was paying attention, but I think I could have done better. And maybe those two things are tied together, spending time with the screen instead of paying more attention. And part of that is, and I'm still this way to some extent, I don't like discovering things and dealing with the confrontation part. It scares me. And it was hard for me to think about, I should be checking up on their phones. I should be, I can't really think of examples right now, but it, in some ways, it's easier to kind of turn away and want to assume the best instead of being more diligent about it. And not that there were anything, really ridiculous, but I do remember one time, in a more lighthearted sense, Dale was doing his senior sermon for Bear Valley, and he came up to me that morning and said, I'm going to share something in my sermon that you didn't know about. And that's just not a good feeling. And of course, my first reaction to him was, is it going to make me look bad as a mom? How's this going to make me look? But, and he, I don't even know how he'd worked that into an illustration for a sermon, but he shared this big thing that he and his brothers did that we never learned about, and there have been instances like that since then that just make me so amazed. And you were talking about the fighting and the kind of road wrestling and stuff that they did. Well, I always thought that the boys were really tight, really close, that they would have their little spats every now and then, but overall, throughout their entire childhood, the boys were really tight and continue to be really tight. And I love that. But I did learn later, and I'm not going to mention names because I don't want to throw any of them under the bus, but I did learn later that one of them apparently cussed in the church parking lot. And another of the brothers hauled off and punched him in the face when he did that. And, and I was just like, you punched your brother in the face? What? I just couldn't even envision that happening. Like, just to haul out, just as hard as you can, knock them out. And so learning about things like that after the fact, I just sit here and go, was I just the most clueless parent? I thought we were, overall doing pretty good.
Well, you talk about social media, and there have been so many times I've looked back at my parenting and been so thankful that didn't come along until after mine were out of the, well, I mean, there was Facebook by the time the boys were in high school, but we didn't have the phone capability of being on Facebook on your phone. It was always at my computer that I remember. They probably crossed over some, but I'm so thankful that there was no social media when they were little, because I look at it now and think of the comparisons and the highlight reels that we families show sometimes about making things look easier than it really is, or on the other end of the spectrum, just showing all of the hard and the bad things. And there's somewhere in the middle that would be helpful. But I'm thankful I didn't really have to deal with social media too much. There was texting. And I remember one of mine at some point racking up quite a bill when they were 10 cents per text.
Right.
And yeah, he got a hold of it. But yeah, it's interesting to look back on things like that. And, I've also noticed watching my kids parent now that as a grandparent, I think I've told you this before, I am far more nervous about being outside with my grandkids or driving somewhere with them or just whatever. I'm afraid they're going to get hurt. I'm afraid they're going to touch something they shouldn't. And I never was that way as a mom that I can remember, because you can't be. You have to, if I was mothering right now in the sense of the way I grandmother, I'd have been all over them, following them all over the place and just scared to death all the time. And you can't do that as a mother.
No.
You have to let them explore and make some mistakes and get hurt sometimes in order for them to learn and grow. You can't just put them in a plastic bubble and let them keep them from being hurt all the time. So when I see Erin is such a good, calm mama, all of them are, but Erin's got 3 now and my other 2 just have 1 each, but she doesn't hover. And I think that's great because I hover and it just makes me nervous. I hover now. I didn't then. So you just can't protect them from things happening and the humorous things that you're talking about. And I think what you were mentioning of Dale had something to do with floating a picnic table in the lake or something like that. It's a good story now.
They were all into survival, the survival skills. If you can live off the land in the woods with your bare hands, and they were all into Bear Grylls, and so they were always just taking off and having these grand adventures. And then we would find out later some of the things that they did on these grand adventures, and then for a while they got into parkour, and they were always creating these courses and doing these crazy things. And there were times when Carl came home, in particular one time, his entire back was just shredded. I mean, he had just slid down a road. I think he somehow flung himself off of a bike or something, and he just slid all the way down this hill on a road, and he came home with his whole back gravel embedded into it, and it was horrible. But they were always doing stuff like that. And I really think that in a way this is a timely discussion, because that phrase, let boys be boys, that can be abused. And certainly I would never condone with that phrase, let boys be boys, improper behavior,
right?
Especially toward the opposite sex or anything like that. That's not what I'm talking about. But in a sense, in this day and age especially, let boys be boys, and let them rough and tumble and explore and experience those guy tendencies, and instead of stifling them and taking that away from them. Or I just think that moms today are facing some things that we never had to face,
right,
when it comes to our children and their gender and the differences between boys and girls. And I can't imagine what that's like now with all the outside pressure coming in and things coming in. But boys are different. I remember when we were brand new parents, for whatever reason, I don't know why, but for whatever reason, I decided that our boys weren't going to have guns, no toy guns, no.
We all go through a stage like that.
I think it's because we were in the Richmond area and DC and violence and all that kind of stuff. And Gary was probably 2 years old, and he's chewing his peanut butter and jelly sandwich into the shape of a gun and starts going pew, 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 pew. And in that moment, I'm thinking, how, we didn't let him watch things with violence. We didn't give him any toy guns, but somehow he still knew to do that. And then I thought, there's just something about that. It's just ingrained. And of course that we kind of work through all that. And now they all have guns and we all take gun safety and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, there's just something about it that, little boys are different, and we need to let them be boys.
Well, and having a strong male role model.
Mm-hmm.
And, we were so blessed, you and I both, in that our boys had a father who was a very strong male influence, and mine were surrounded by good men. They had good grandfathers and uncles and members of the congregation. But something that I have always thought was so important, and this is true for girls too, but specifically I think for boys, is to have a mentor that is not their dad, and that it's someone that you trust. And you can't always force this, but you can really put men in their path and ask men to be involved with them. And I think with each one of mine, they had those mentors. Some of them were, I think of a couple of my boys had far older mentors. One of them, I mentioned Angela Smith a minute ago, but her dad, Gary Montgomery, was a mentor to one of my boys in particular. But then there were some that were younger too. They were in college when my boys were in high school. And there were times that there were probably things that they would talk to that mentor about that they wouldn't to their dad, or for sure me. By the time they're teenagers, they're going to talk more to their dad or to someone that they respect, and we can encourage that. We can make sure that they have that opportunity with men from the congregation and handpick them. And sometimes it happens organically, but there are opportunities we have to put mentors in their path. And I just have always felt like that was so, so important, especially members of the church that will provide guidance with spiritual things, not just boy things, but spiritual things. So to me, I have recommended that to a lot of mothers, is to find a mentor, ask them to be involved with your son. And, obviously you've got to be involved yourself and be watchful and be careful, because sometimes there are things about people that we wish they wouldn't have that kind of influence on our sons. Right. But I just think that's such a good thing to have a mentor in place.
I can recall some names that we're so grateful for that influenced our boys and continue to just step in. They took an interest, and we're so grateful for that. And, whether it was taking them out to lunch, or I think about Mike Vestal, he probably mentors everybody.
Yeah, he does.
But he's always looking for ways to encourage others and step in and give them a good word and build them up and give them random things, a Bible, a ring, money, he's just that kind of person. And sometimes I turn around and I have to remind myself, now it's our turn. We had people doing that for our kids, and now it's our turn. And are we doing our part to turn around and invest in the lives of other families and young families? And, sometimes I forget that it's not all about us and us receiving all the time anymore. It's our turn to be given back.
Yeah, that's a great point. Corey Myers was one of those for all three of my boys. And he was not that much older. He was probably, he would have been a senior in high school when Jordan was either a freshman or sophomore. So he was not that much older, but for each one, as they've come along, they played football together, and he was just such a good natured guy. And he helped to shape, I think, who all of my boys are today. So it's a great thing. I was always thinking about what are some things that I want for them now, and their relationship is important to me. And I know you've already mentioned how they're still tight. Your boys are still tight. And it's just natural as they grow older and live in different areas of the country that they develop their own friendships and have their own lives that they're leading. But it is important, I think, as moms, that we see that our sons still love each other. One of the things that stands out so much in my mind was Jordan was already out of high school, and Jake he must have been a senior in high school, because they were both quarterbacks and they played together for a while. When Jordan was a senior and Jake was a sophomore, they were both quarterbacks for the local high school team. And so Jake didn't get a lot of playing time because he was younger, but by the time he was a senior, he was getting quite a bit of playing time. But a game very early on in his senior year, he tore his ACL.
Yeah.
And he had already signed or had interest in playing football at Harding, but he fell. And there was something about the way that he fell and the way that he didn't move just right. We were at Tony Burger Center. You know how you have those moments in your life that you can just still see in your mind. We were up in the stands. I had family. My aunt and uncle were here from Atlanta, but Jordan was there. And he's watching what was going on the field. And before I even knew what was going on, Jordan had jumped the fence and had run out on the field and was out there with Jake. And I don't remember a whole lot after that. It could have been that Jordan got out there and said, you shouldn't have done that. But I don't think, because he had torn his ACL and he knew how important football was to him, and he knew how important it was to Jake. And that it brings tears to my eyes when I think about it even now, because sometimes you just see love and care more than you hear it or more than you feel it, you see it. And that meant a lot to me to know that they had that kind of relationship. So I think sometimes about how God views us when we bicker and fight, because I know how it hurt my heart when they were younger. And I'm talking about early high school, middle school. And it was painful for me to see how they fought, and at times just seemed like they couldn't stand each other. And I know that's natural. It's just the way siblings are sometimes, but it makes me think of how God sees us bickering and fighting and not getting along, and how much he longs for us to love one another and to be unified and to have that unity. So anyway, I was just thinking about how much I pray for them to love one another and to respect one another, even as they grow older. So
yeah, because the exact opposite of this is true. Also, when you see how close they are and how they stick up for each other and lift each other up and want to spend time together, as a parent, it just fills your heart. It just makes you feel so, so good. And you're happy for them because they have each other, and they're going to strengthen each other, help each other through hard times. They're going to be, it just makes you feel good. It's like an extra security net for them as they're making their way through life. And God has to feel the same way about us as his children also, when we spend time together, and we want to spend time together as Christians, and we look out for each other and hold each other up because we're helping each other, and it's got to make his heart feel good too.
Yeah. Have you ever looked at, changing the subject just a little tiny bit, have you ever looked at birth order charts?
No, but I follow this guy on Instagram.
It's kind of like saying, I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV.
Well, he's hilarious. I'll have to look up his name, but all of his little things that he does have to do with first child, second child, third child. And it's 3, he always does 3 boys, and it's first, second, and third. So of course I'm hugely interested, but he nails it every time. And he acts out all these scenarios where here's how the first child responds, here's how the middle child responds, and here's how the baby responds. And it is spot on. It's hilarious.
You need to send me a link to that. I need to see that.
Yes, I will. Yeah.
But when I look at, I looked at it this morning, when I look at those, I see characteristics. And this is kind of like the Enneagram discussion we had, because it's not always true. But the first child, it says that they're normally, parents normally are very by the book with their first child, very stringent with the rules.
That's so true.
And this one that I was reading this morning says that we're overly neurotic with our first child. And I think that was true of us. You want to do everything right. You want to make sure that they are healthy and not just physically healthy, but mentally and socially and spiritually healthy. And so you are like by the book, going to do everything right.
Yeah.
And so I think that maybe they get this tendency. Now you're the oldest child, but you only have one sister, so I don't know how much this will follow. But it said that the first child can be more concerned about the little things than subsequent siblings. And it said that this might lead to a tendency for the first child to be a perfectionist. But the first child, it says, is reliable, conscientious, structured, responsible, an achiever, and independent. And that nails our first child. I mean, I think of all those things. He's very reliable. I mean, sorry, boys, if I embarrass you with all this, I'm trying not to. But I mean, it really did. But the middle child, because by that time, you already have one toddling around, and so you can't pay as much attention to every little thing. So the middle child ends up having a larger social circle, thriving on friendship that isn't necessarily within the family, but having friends outside the family, can tend to be a people pleaser, and we'll go with the flow. And I don't think of my middle son as necessarily always being a people pleaser, although I think we all have some of those tendencies, but he is very much go with the flow and peacemaker. That was another characteristic of a middle child, is a peacemaker, and he is very much a peacemaker. And then the baby of the family, he said that parents have I don't know if I'll say this right, but I know what it means, laissez-faire. It's kind of like a whatever happens, hands off kind of thing.
Yeah.
How do you say it?
I think it's laissez-faire.
Laissez-faire. Okay. Wait, you didn't know, people, that you were going to have a French lesson today. That is French, right?
I don't even know that.
I'm pretty sure
I probably
French.
didn't even say it right.
Well, someone I'm sure will let us know. But the baby tends to be more fun-loving, uncomplicated, outgoing, charming, agreeable, and less disciplined. And I know that my two older boys would definitely say the less disciplined part about their baby brother. But I would disagree. I think that what he has done as a young man would show that he is not undisciplined. But even now they're going to say, see, you stick up for him even on your podcast. But anyway, I just thought it was fun to look at. I've looked at that before. And again, I think you can rise to the level of your expectations. So if you expect someone to be a people pleaser, and you may raise them that way. So I don't necessarily think you need to look at that as your parenting, but it was fun to look back on it, once they were grown, to see. Do you see any of those characteristics in yours?
I do. Goodness. Sort of.
Yeah.
I think the middle child, yes, spot on. And the youngest, some of that I see with Gary. I feel like he kind of started out that way and then kind of shifted as he grew in his own adulthood, and kind of wanted to go off and be his own man and kind of strike out against maybe the norm or the expectations, or as he's, figuring things out or whatever. But
yeah.
And I'm probably not wording that right, but I wanted to know what your favorite thing about being a boy mom is.
Well, not just off the top of my head. You read things, and I read things while we were kind of preparing for this, and one of them said that you're the queen of the home. And I don't really even like that word, queen. I never felt like the queen because I was the only girl in the house. But my favorite thing was, and this might choke me up, but just I was their girl. And even when I wrote that down, I wrote, I am their girl. And I had to kind of mark that back out and say, I was their girl. And I don't say that with any resentment at all, because they have grown up, they have met wonderful women, and now each of their wives is their girl. And I want that with all of my heart. And I love how they love each other. And that is exactly what I want. But my favorite thing about having all boys was I was their girl. I was the one that I knew them better than anybody else while they were growing up. I knew what they wanted and what they needed. They came to me for comfort. They came to me to talk, once they kind of laid down the guard that they'd put up in the world, and they came home. And I tried really hard to have a home that was a place that they could come and let their guard down, not to have to be cautious and to be careful about how they felt. No one was going to make fun, or no one, we teased, but we weren't going to make fun of them. And it was a safe place. But when I think back on during worship, I had 3 boys that leaned on me the whole time. And at the time, I remember I was like, if anyone will just let go and quit touching me. But at the same time, I loved it because I had one leaning on each shoulder and one in my lap. And there's nothing better than that, to have
Mm-hmm.
3 little boys that God gave to me and to John, but to me, because I was with them all the time. And I was the one that they needed, and I was the one that they wanted. And so, no, I didn't ever feel like a queen in my house, and I would never really want to feel like that. But I felt pretty special because I was their mom and I was their girl. And that's just the only way I can think to put it, is being their girl. And as grown men now, I know they still love me, but they've gone on to make their own homes. And that's exactly the way that God wants it to be, and exactly the way I want it to be. And I'm thankful if there ever has been a time that I have wished that back. Maybe I have thought to myself how thankful I was, and I still am, that Grady and Janice, my in-laws, allowed John to leave father and mother and to make a home with me. And that's what I want. I want that same feeling that I got from my in-laws. I want my girls to know that that's exactly what I want for my boys, is for them to have their own home and their own family and their own circle and their own friends and their own life. And I just want a little piece of it. I just want, I need to know that they still love me, and that they still, what is it, now that they're grown, we need their respect and their admiration. And we respect them and admire them and love them. And, it made me think of that old song. I don't know what the name of it is. The Cat's in the Cradle. I don't remember who sings it, but how when they're little, people are warning us, you're gonna want this time back. And now here it is. I don't necessarily want that time back. There's times that I'd like to have maybe a day, go back for a day and experience that again. But I love where they are now. And I love that we can be their friends now. There were times that we couldn't necessarily, we had to discipline them, and we had to raise them and train them and instruct, and couldn't necessarily be there. Not that we were not friends, but now is the time that we can enjoy that friendship. So I would say that I was their girl. What's your favorite thing about being a boy mom?
It might be similar, but I was trying to think about how to word it. And I think if I could just sum it up, it would be, they just have this exuberant zest for life. And I love that about our boys. And it kind of is an umbrella over everything. I mean, their love for adventures and their love for imagination, and they've got to come up with a story about the adventure and tell you all about it, and their play, whether it's in their play or a project, or even as you were just talking about with that affection, there's no holding back. It's just because it's this huge zest for life, and everything has to be big. And so they love big, and they're affectionate. And I never, even though I messed up plenty as a mom, and there were times when they would be upset with us as parents or whatever, there was never, I can honestly look back and say, there was never a moment when I thought, I feel like he doesn't even like me. It was just, they were always just quick to forgive. Just so over the top in their affection. They just didn't hold back. I feel like I'm not wording this great, but
no, I know what you're saying. I can see that.
And I just want to, if I could go back now, that's what I would just squeeze onto with everything I've got, is when they come up for that good night hug, just just squeeze it in for all I've got. And Neil's always been a gentleman. And part of that is because when we were dating, the passenger door on his car didn't open from the inside. He had to go around and get my door. And so it always looked like he was being a gentleman. Well, it just stuck. Like, he's always done that. And from the time the boys were little, when he would leave town, one of them would do that for me. And I don't know that he told them to do that, or they just saw him do that. But if he was out of town, one of them would come get my door.
Oh, that's sweet.
Be the gentleman. And it's just things like that there's this huge capacity for life and love and affection. And I just absolutely loved it. I never forget, when Gary was a baby, there was a friend of mine, her son was graduating high school and going off to college. And so mine was still a baby. And I remember just wanting to cry for her and thinking,
Mhm.
oh, I can't, I'm holding my child and I'm thinking, I can't imagine saying goodbye. That would be terrible.
Mhm.
And I'll never forget, she said, well, God kind of works it out that by the time they're that age, you're ready for them to
Yeah.
leave. You are ready for them to be out of the house.
Mhm.
And at the time, I remember thinking, what? That can't be possible. And I kept waiting for that moment and it never came.
Mm.
It never came for me.
Really?
Mm-mm. And I'm not trying to gloss over and look back on rose-colored glasses, even though I sure am. I'm not saying there weren't moments of frustration but I never got to the point where when it was time for them to leave, I was ready for them to go.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember. I know what you're talking about. And yeah, I can see a little bit of what she was talking about. I know that their senior year in high school, there was times that I felt that door closing,
Mhm.
and I knew it was coming, and you're not ready for it because they're going to go somewhere, and it's not ever going to be the same again. But sometimes not ever being the same again is a good thing.
Yeah.
Because that's what God intends. One of John's mentors always would say, if they don't grow up and move on, there's something wrong.
Yeah.
And so that they have to move along. So that senior year in high school, I remember just, every time, I guess maybe because they're pulling away a little bit and I'm pulling back, I'm wanting to be around them as much as I could. And there were times we would take trips and I would just look at them and think, is this the last time? And are we going to do this again? But the summer before college, I remember with each one of them, they were pulling hard and it was time. And I know that people have different opinions about when it's time for them to go. And no, I don't think we're ever fully ready for it. But I even wrote this down in my notes for today, how that senior year, the year and Jordan was older, we started him late in school. So he was 19, almost 19 by the time he graduated. And he was so ready. He was just so ready. And it just felt like those apron strings were stretching, and I knew that it was going to have to be, and it did, and it was okay.
Yeah.
And that was the one thing that I learned, I think, with him that helped me with when it was time for Jake and Micah to leave, is that once Jordan was gone, and it was a little easier with him because he went to college real close. And so I knew that we would be able to see him pretty often. And I learned that I was going to be okay. That yes, it was going to be different, but different was going to be okay. But the thing is, and you and I both, we know we don't want to in any way hold ourselves up as any kind of standard necessarily, but
Oh no.
no, but knowing that this is what I would encourage young moms, knowing that what the purpose of maybe it didn't look like this every single hour of every single day, but knowing that what you were doing was raising young men to be men of God. And that is if you can't see it right here, it's out here. And that's your goal. And when you have that in your mind and know that you're raising your little boys to be men of God, that it makes it a little easier the older they grow and when they start stretching and trying to move away. And so it's hard, but it's necessary. And that.
Oh, yeah.
And here we are on the other side, and it's great. It's great.
It is. And it's great at the time too, because they're excited and you can't help but be happy for them, to do, to go be adults and do what they want to do and start their families and live their lives. And it's fun and exciting to see all of that and watch. I felt like every single stage has been wonderful and beautiful in its different ways, babies, toddlerhoods, adolescents, teens, you know, and now adults, you know,
Mhm.
and the change in relationship that comes, it's all been wonderful and exciting. And
Yeah.
but bittersweet,
Yeah.
bittersweet. And the our house was always filled with music because all the boys
Mhm.
played and sang, played guitars and sang and had their little band. And that was the biggest thing for me when they left is I thought, man, it's quiet in this house.
Yeah.
And I love how when they all come over here and they get together, they pull those guitars back out, you know, and they start singing. And that's usually when I really start feeling sentimental is when they come back and they start playing. There's a big part of me that's going, oh, I really miss that. Oh, I really
Yeah.
miss that.
Yeah. 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 I get it. I understand what you're
But
saying.
that's how it's supposed to be. And it's so amazing to me when you're in the throes of parenting. What's that saying about parenting that the days are long but the years are short?
Mhm.
When you're smack dab in the middle of it, it just seems like it's all out in front of you, and it's years and years and years all out in front of you. And depending on what your perspective is of, yikes, I've got years of this ahead of me, or I've got years of this to enjoy ahead of me, you know, it seems like it's just all out in front of you and it's going to last forever. And then when it's over and you look back, you think there's so much of our lives that is still ahead.
Yeah.
You know, the times when we have children in the home is just this really small, small window of our entire lives as women.
Mhm.
And what does that relationship look like on the other side of them stepping out your door for the last time, you know, as far as being under your authority as a
Right.
mom? And what is that relationship going to look like going forward, you
Yeah.
know, and building and growing and encouraging and strengthening each other? um, I mean, one thing you and I both know is you continue to pray. You
Mhm.
never ever stop praying and being concerned. But at the same time, seeing them and the things that they're doing stretches you.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
you know, sometimes see even the things that they're doing that you're concerned about stretches you in a way because you have to learn how to handle that differently
Mhm.
and pray about it and use wisdom. And I don't know, it's every single phase. It's just something new to learn and something to pray about. And I'm grateful for, we've mentioned this before, but the fact that God loves them even more than we do.
Yeah.
And when I tried to do things to the best of my ability but fell short, you know, he's there and I've turned them over into his care, and he's going to look out for them and take care of them no matter what. And that's what we continually pray for.
Exactly. I was just thinking that while you said it, just thinking that how many times did I have to remind myself that he is not my child.
Mhm.
God gave him to me for
Mhm.
this certain period of time, but he is God's child and God loves him even more than I do. And it's so hard as a mom to imagine anyone, anything loving your child more desperately, more what word do you even use to say how much you love your child, but to
Mhm.
know that God treasures them even more than we do is a comforting thing. It's just a comforting thing. So thankful for
Mhm.
that.
Yes. Yeah.
I wrote down a couple, or I took screenshots. I went and looked at some boy mom quotes, and there was two or three of them that I wanted to share with you. And one of them was, to me, just the whole theme of this podcast. It's Shel Silverstein, so it's a children's
Oh,
book.
yeah.
But he said, and she loved a little boy very, very much, even more than she loved herself.
Is that the Giving Tree?
It didn't say where it came from,
I think
but
that's the Giving Tree.
probably so.
Oh, yeah, that's a tearjerker book.
Yeah. But then there was another one that says, the most important mark I will leave on this world is my son. Just grateful that God gave us three of those marks to make. Wow, I was not going to do this. I prayed not to do this. And then I
It's
love
okay.
this one.
It's
I love
okay.
this one because it's so true. No man succeeds without a good woman behind him, wife or mother. If it is both, he is twice blessed indeed.
Hmm.
And I think, I pray that they all, and I think they do, view me as having been a good mother, but they all have wonderful wives. So they are all three blessed, I think, because they have a mother that I know loves them. And they each have a wife that I also know loves them very much. And how blessed are we because of that?
Absolutely. Anytime I start feeling sentimental like that, like the tears are really coming on, I just picture my kids hanging from the rafters in the basement. That was weird. I don't know why they thought that was hilarious, but in one of our houses, our laundry was in the basement, and I always called it the dungeon because it was not a pretty basement, and concrete floor and these rafters in the ceiling. I'd go down there with my laundry basket, and usually the lights were off, start the laundry, and they just thought it was hilarious to attach a belt around their waist into the rafters and just hang there from the rafters of the ceiling in the basement, just swinging without making a noise to see how
Just for
long
fun.
to see how long they could go undetected while I'm doing the laundry, knowing that if I walked around the corner and saw these bodies hanging from the rafters, I'd probably scream and have a heart attack on the spot. But for whatever reason, they just thought that was hilarious. And so when they tell the story now, they can hardly get through it. They think it's that funny. They're cracking up at how hilarious they were. And so that's what I picture when I think, I'm really feeling blue. I'm really feeling sad I'm feeling sentimental. And then I think,
I'm
just picturing them squeaking, swinging from the rafters in the basement, like some horror movie or something.
I picture gym bags.
Yeah.
There is no stink.
Yes.
There is no stench like the stench of a gym bag, especially one that has been maybe left in the gym locker room over Christmas break, and then they bring it home.
Yes.
But there were times that I remember having to pull over on the way home from a football game. We had to pull over, and you're just going to have to take those shoes and socks off and tie them up in a plastic bag and put them in the trunk. And I'm going to find some wipes or something. But yeah, that was bad. So yeah, I can think back on stuff like that and think that, I don't miss that at all.
I do remember right at the beginning of Empty Nest, I was feeling all sad about it and the house too quiet. And then I came home from work one day and I walked in the door and I was like, everything looks just like I left it.
Yeah.
There's
nice.
There's no gym bags, there's no backpacks, there's no piles of things here and there. And, you can follow the trail of where they've been in the house, And I remember that one moment thinking, well, maybe this won't be horrible. I did think of another regret, though. We were talking about parental regrets. And I don't know why. Speaking of, now we know where our children get it from, them thinking it'd be hilarious to scare me by swinging from the rafters. But I used to enjoy scaring my children. And, like sneaking up on them while they're in the shower, or chasing them up the stairs in the dark. That horrible feeling of somebody chasing you upstairs. I don't know why, but I find that vastly entertaining. And
still,
yes, finding ways to. It started when we were first married. I scared Neil half to death, and just hovering in the dark to wait and jump out and boo somebody or whatever. I have a sick mind, I guess. I just think that's hilarious. But anyway, apparently, now that they're grown and married, they've tried that on their wives. And none of them appreciate it. None of the wives think it's funny. And so that's my bad. I'm sorry to all three of my daughters-in-law. They got that from me. So.
I just did that to Jackson last weekend. We were in the living room with the girls, and Erin came home, and I knew she was bringing Jackson with her, but I guess he was trying to sneak up on me. And so I thought I would get him first. And I did. So yeah, I totally relate. I like to do a little, I guess I have a sick mind too. Maybe that's why we're friends.
Yeah. I always worried about, the boys need to learn how to do their own laundry. They need to clean up their rooms. They need to all these things, because I don't want my future daughters-in-law to hate me.
Yeah.
So I was focused on that. I didn't think about the whole scaring somebody being an issue. So
yeah, well,
oops.
They'll get over it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if you don't have anything else, maybe we should shift over.
We
could literally talk about this all day long.
Yeah.
Probably, but we don't
and
have.
I'm sure there's things that we'll think later on. Well, why didn't I bring that up? But maybe we'll do a part 2 sometime.
Yeah, I'm sure we will.
Yeah.
So our random question, and you came up with this one: is there such a thing as being too old or too young to wear a certain style or trend? So you go first, because I don't know that we'll have the same answer on this one.
Yeah, my answer is yes. You want me to elaborate on it?
Yeah,
okay.
You can't just say yes.
Well, I will just say this, and I apologize in advance for whoever I offend. I really don't mean to offend anyone because I am this age now, but I so totally stuck my foot in my mouth with my friend Robin Riddick. And if you're listening, Robin, I'm sorry, but I said something to her one day about, you're getting a little older when Alfred Dunner things start looking cute. And she said, oh, that was the top that I had on yesterday. And I thought, oh, wow. But I mean, it was sort of a compliment because I'm saying that I find Alfred Dunner things are cute. And I typically think of Alfred Dunner as being one of those brands that mature women wear. Mm-hmm. So either they're making them cuter than they used to, or I'm just at that age. You're shaking your head no, so maybe not.
Let me just say, I don't think they're making them cuter than they used to.
So I'm just getting older. But yeah, I mean, I think that there are times, and I think this about myself. I'm at a certain, I'm a mature, I'm going to say I'm firmly in middle age, maybe even leaning to the older side of middle age. And I don't want to wear jeans. Sorry, people, if you are my age and you wear these, but jeans with holes in them. I just think that's maybe for younger women. And it's not that I think that you shouldn't. It's not at all any kind of a moral thing, or it's just my feeling about myself that I don't want to do it. And just because I feel like I don't want to look like someone who's trying to be younger than she is. Although I don't, obviously we had the discussion about our hair and not wanting to be gray yet. So that's just my opinion. There's things that I think I'm too old to wear. And I think that on the other end too, there's maybe some things that young women wear that date them as maybe looking a little older, but that's just my opinion. What do you think?
So I think the answer is no.
Okay.
But I didn't know I thought that. I had to really think this through. And because my first reaction is, well, it's a little bit sad when women who are getting older try to look sexy.
Yeah.
And there were the mini skirt and the halter tops and all that I think that looks a little bit desperate. But then I thought that doesn't really apply because Christian women of all ages should not be dressing that way. Right. I mean, so in context of our audience and what we're talking about, this is a podcast for Christian women. To me, that's the only thing, but that for us, none of us should be dressing that way anyway. But I started thinking about it and I thought, when it comes to being too old or too young, I've seen women that can pull off, like you were saying, the ripped jeans look and make it look classy. And I've seen, for me, I start thinking about things like graphic tees, and things that might be in the little younger section. But I've seen women pull that off and kind of mishmash it with a pearl necklace, and it looks completely natural on her, and completely normal on her. And so that's why I've decided, I think the answer is no, because I think once you get to a certain age and you're comfortable in your own skin, that's what comes across. Yeah. And your own style and your own unique way of putting things together fits your personality. So I don't know that there's necessarily an age thing where you shouldn't wear this or you shouldn't wear that because you're too old or too young. I think the biggest mistake is when we try to dress like something we're not. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Maybe you're still figuring it out. You don't know your own style. You end up putting on something that you're obviously uncomfortable in that, or it just doesn't suit you, or whatever. But I don't know. I just know too many. I mean, I've seen women that I think, how does she do that? How does she pull that off? Because I never in a million years would have thought to put that outfit together, but it completely works. You think that about me all the time, don't you? I have never thought that about you. You and your thrift store wardrobe looks amazing. Yeah. Well, so when I come this weekend in my Alfred Dunner and you have on your ripped jeans. Yeah, I don't even own a pair of ripped jeans. I am not one of those women that's cool enough to pull it off. So. Well, I bet you could. Yeah.
Yeah, I
All
think
right.
that's a
Well,
good way of putting it. It's just be comfortable in your own skin, be modest, and I mean that in
yes.
the sense of not drawing undue
Yeah.
attention to ourselves, not necessarily any other way, but yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So
Okay.
this was a great conversation. You said it was going to be lighthearted and you made us both cry. So
Yeah.
I don't
I
really
didn't make
appreciate
us both
that.
cry. I made me cry. You made you cry.
Okay, whatever. Anyway, ladies, thank you so much for listening in. And as always, we would love to hear from you. And if you're a boy mom, share some of your favorite things about it or just parenting in general. We love the community and feedback, especially on our Looking Up Facebook group. So join us over there. And until next time, Carla,
Keep looking up.
keep looking up. Enjoyed it. I love you.
Love you too. See you soon.